So here we have the green-red Madcap Experiment Tooth and Nail deck. I saw this deck posted on TCGplayer and I needed to try it for myself. So I've seen Madcap Experiment decks and Tooth and Nail decks, so why not just combine the two? And that's the idea of the deck. We've got the Platinum Empyrean Madcap Experiment package. We've got the Tooth and Nail Xenagos plus Emrakul package. A pretty simple mana base, actually. So the mana base is great. We've got a lot of green sources. Almost all of our lands produce a green, besides the one mountain. So we've got 9 basic forests because we're playing Blood Moon. We really need to have multiple green mana and able to function. And then there's also a lot of red, but the red isn't as important. We need green on turn 1, as you can see by all the 1 mana accelerants here. So we've got our auras that enchant lands. So those are Utopia Sprawl and Overgrowth. But we've also got Arbor Elf, Voyaging Satyr, and Garruk Wildspeaker. So what you can do is you can play Utopia Sprawl or Overgrowth and then untap that enchanted land, and you can make a ton of mana that way. More than just, say, Overgrowth producing an extra 2 or Utopia Sprawl producing an extra 1. It's a lot more than that once you factor in the fact that you can tap the enchanted land, then untap it, then tap it again, create a bunch of mana. So we've got a lot of early acceleration to help play these big spells later on. So we can play a turn 2 Blood Moon. We've got 10 ways to accelerate us into having 3 mana on turn 2. So we can play turn 2 Blood Moon, turn 2 Overgrowth. The Eternal Witness is here. It's just a fine card, but we've got ways to search our deck for creatures. So sometimes you'll want it, especially later in the game. There's 4 Madcap Experiments to go with 2 Platinum Empyreans. And basically, Madcap Experiment, you play it, and you search your library for an artifact, and then you lose life equal to the amount of cards you go through in order to search for that artifact. But as it turns out, the fact that we're putting in Platinum Empyrean into play means that our life total is not going to be affected. We're just going to be playing an 8/8 that is pretty insane and protects our life total. So it ends up just being a 4 mana Platinum Empyrean. Turns out that's pretty good in Modern. So we've got also at 4 mana some Planeswalkers. Garruk, I already mentioned. It's very synergistic with the deck because of the ability to untap our lands. Occasionally you'll use the Overrun or the Beast Mode as well. And then there's a 3-1 split, and there's also a 3-1 split between Garruk and Chandra. Chandra being the other 4 mana Planeswalker, and another way to help us accelerate or get rid of a creature if we need to. At 5, we've got Thragtusk, which is a value creature. Sometimes you'll get it off Tooth and Nail, rarely, but I've liked it as a way to gain life and an alternative win condition in some matchups. Xenagos, God of Revels. This is what you get. You normally off Tooth and Nail, you'll get Xenagos, you'll get Emrakul. So what you can do is you can then give Emrakul haste, and you can double its power. So you're then attacking your opponent for 30 and the Annihilator 6, and that's going to win the game on the spot. So when you're able to Tooth and Nail with Entwine, Tooth and Nail with Entwine costs 7. So normally Tooth and Nail is either search your library for 2 creatures or put 2 creatures from your hand into play. So that's for 7, you can do either one of those. But at 9 mana, which is the Entwine cost is an additional 2, you can search your library for 2 creatures and then in the same motion right away put those 2 creatures into play. So you normally want to be entwining Tooth and Nail. Sometimes you'll just cast it for one of the modes if you already have 2 creatures in your hand, or if you're not going to get to 9, maybe you need to search your library for 2 creatures. But most of the time it is going to be entwine in this deck. Primal Command is another way to search for creatures. It gains life. It can be a way to turn off your opponent's graveyard synergies. So it does a lot of different things. And that's why I like the card. There's 1 main and 1 in the board. the Hornet Queen, it's another win condition where if your opponent is able to stop your primary game plan, you can just play Hornet Queen. You can search for it with Primal Command or what have you. And it turns out that 4 insects plus the Hornet Queen itself can get the job done a lot of the time. Say you play this card against Jund or Abzan. There's no way that they can get through all of these insects and Hornet Queen without using a ton of resources, which normally they don't have access to. So this is the main deck. It's a nice main deck plan. Just accelerate out, play Madcap Experiment or Tooth and Nail, and hope that that is good enough. And after sideboard, sometimes your opponent has more disruption, so we can play more of a fair game plan. So we've got these Harmonizes to draw us cards. We've got Obstinate Baloth, kind of similar to Thragtusk, as another way to gain life, and just a 4/4 turns out is sometimes pretty good. Primal Command comes in a lot of matchups, it turns out. The Ravenous Traps are basically just for Dredge. Dredge is still pretty popular in Modern. So the Platinum Angels may stand out here. The Platinum Angels come in exchange for Platinum Empyrean. So say you're playing against Infect. It turns out the Platinum Empyrean does not really matter against Infect because it does not stop Infect damage from coming at you. But if you have Platinum Angel, it's completely the opposite. Platinum Angel in play against Infect will win you the game. So there's going to be certain matchups where you want the Angel and not the Empyrean. Even though when you do Madcap Experiment for Platinum Angel, you are going to lose life, unlike when you get Platinum Empyrean. There's one copy of Boseiju. Boseiju is a way to help get your Madcap Experiment or Tooth and Nail through counter magic. Crumble to Dust, it's a one of against the decks with a lot of non-basic lands. Say you're playing against Tron. This is a great card against Tron. Bonfire of the Damned, I like these random one-ofs, essentially. It can win you the game if you miracle it, or you can hardcast it. There's plenty of mana acceleration so that you can still hardcast it with X being 4, and you can wrath your opponent's board, say. So it's a cool card. I don't like having 2 because if you ever draw 2, it's just you really don't want to draw 2 copies of this card. But you do want to miracle it. And then there's 2 Sudden Shocks. This card is great against Infect. It's fine in some other matchups. It's just a way of getting rid of your opponent's early creatures. But against Infect, if your opponent has an early creature and then they go for a pump spell and you just go, oh, I'm going to Sudden Shock it, then your opponent can't save that creature. They can't even protect it with something like a Vines of Atswood. And it turns out it's pretty good. And then 2 copies of Ancient Grudge. This clearly comes in against the artifact-based decks. There's some decks with random artifacts like Inkmoth Nexus out of Infect. Sometimes you can board an Ancient Grudge, but mainly it's for Affinity and Lantern. So this is the deck, and been really happy with it and looking forward to playing some more games.